إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره. Without a doubt, all of our praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we praise Him alone, we seek His forgiveness, and we seek His protection. And we seek assistance from Him alone. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. We ask Allah, we seek His protection from our own evil thoughts and desires, ومن سيئات أعمالنا, and from our evil actions. من يهده الله فلا مضل له. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides to this path, no one can misguide. ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows to go astray because of their own recklessness, their own arrogance, no one can force that person to this guidance. And what is that guidance other than وَنَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ, that we bear witness and we testify that there is nothing worthy of our worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ, and we bear witness and we testify that this man named Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was his last and final messenger. Amma ba'd, my dear brothers and sisters, one day a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he was known as a Bedouin. And for those of you that may not know what a Bedouin was like, imagine nowadays what you would call somebody who lives out in the boonies, right? Someone who lives out in the middle of nowhere, where there's no society, no people around them. And so these types of people were not as refined in terms of their manners and in terms of their dealings with the people. And so the man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and because he was not as refined in his manners and in his civilization and his civilized etiquettes, he comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says, "Oh Muhammad, tell me about the prayer. What do I have to do?" And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, you should pray the 5 daily prayers. And he describes the importance of the prayers. And he says, if you add any additional prayers throughout the day on top of that, it would be good for you. So the man says, "Oh Muhammad, tell me about fasting." And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells him about the obligation of fasting the month of Ramadan. And he says, if you fast any more than that, it would be good for you. And he asks about sadaqah, about zakah. And so the Prophet ﷺ describes zakah, and he says, if you were to give more, it would be good for you. And the man is asking these questions about the basic obligations of Islam. So the man, he stands up and he walks away. He says, Muhammad, "Oh Muhammad, I will not do anything more than the obligations which you have described for me." And he left. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, if this man is telling the truth, then he will be successful. Meaning we have bare minimum obligations we must meet in Islam. But let us compare this man to another companion of the Prophet ﷺ, wherein the Prophet ﷺ is describing the gates of Jannah. And he's telling the companions of these gates, and he's saying there is a gate called Ar-Rayyan, who is for the people that would constantly fast. And there is a gate for the people who would constantly give sadaqah. And there is another gate for the people who would constantly pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is a gate for this, and there is a gate for that. And one of the companions, he asks the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "O Messenger of Allah, is there a person who can enter through any of these gates on the Day of Judgment? Is there a person who can enter through all of these gates on the Day of Judgment?" Imagine you show up on that day, and there's angels in front of all of these gates. And the angels are saying, "Enter my gate." And the other angel is saying, "Enter my gate." What type of a status would you have to have for the angels, all of them, to be asking you to enter through their gates? And so this man says, "O Muhammad, O Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is there a person who on the Day of Judgment can enter through all of these gates?" So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, "Yes, and that I hope it is you." And in another narration he says, "Yes, and it will be you on the Day of Judgment." And this man is none other than Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. A man, when he heard about the excellence of reward that he could seek, didn't stop at the bare minimum. But rather he went after everything that he could, to the point where on the Day of Judgment he wants to be able to enter and desire and strives for being able to enter Jannah through any of these gates. And we ask ourselves, and people say, "Oh, Abu Bakr, that was a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Come on, we can't be like them. They are them and we are us." You don't say that about this life though, do you? How many of us, we struggle, we go through school, we come through different areas. Many of us, maybe even our parents, if not us, came from overseas to struggle for a better life. How many of them you think we're trying to find and we're only achieving for minimum wage? How many people go through university hoping and expecting that after all of their struggle and after all of their studies, they graduate and they make minimum wage? How many people wish that? I understand. Some people might have that circumstance. But how many people wish for those circumstances? None of us. How many of us wish for millions and millions and the lavishes of this life? All of us. And why not? Allahumma zid wa barik. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us and put barakah in it even more. Allahumma ameen. There's nothing wrong with it. None of us would wish for this life to live in that kind of a status. Yet why do we wish and desire for that kind of a status in the afterlife? People say, "Oh, that was Abu Bakr." You know, if you were talking about type of a Imam status, he was a millionaire, a billionaire when it came to his Imam status. That was Abu Bakr, we can't be like him. But no, actually we can't be. Because Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu wasn't only a millionaire or a billionaire in terms of his Imam status, but he was actually extremely wealthy in this life as well. And as we go through the purpose of this khutbah today, is to talk about the characteristics of the people who are successful in this life and the next. Because these characteristics are the same. These characteristics are the same. And the very first characteristic that makes a person successful is that they're not lazy, but rather they're proactive. The Prophet ﷺ would constantly ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect him from being lazy. Al-kasal, laziness. And we see that being proactive is a characteristic of the successful people within our tradition. And even if you were to go to the libraries or go to the bookstores and buy these self-help books, of the characteristics of successful people in this life is that they're constantly proactive. They're not waiting around for results. They're going out and they're achieving them. And they're going out and they're grabbing them. And that's because you don't accidentally become rich. You don't accidentally wake up one day and say, "Wow, I have tens and thousands of dollars in my bank account." No. Success is not an accident. You have to go and achieve it. And you have to seek it. And you have to take that first step towards it. And the same thing for our iman too. The same thing for our iman too. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever, in a hadith Qudsi, he's saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes and he says, whoever comes to me the length of a hand, I come to them the length of a forearm. And whoever comes to me the length of a forearm, I come to them the length of a full arm. And whoever comes to me walking, I come to them running. This is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is describing the attitude that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has towards His creation. Wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us If you want this mercy, it's here provided for you. But in this hadith, you'll notice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if you come to me this length, I'll come to you that length. But who's the person that initiated it? It was us. Our teachers used to always tell us. And we know that some days are good days and some days we have our bad days. One day a man came to our teacher and he says, look, oh Shaykh, I feel far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Shaykh looked at him and he says, who moved? Did Allah abandon you? Or did you abandon the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That was the response. When we have our bad days, we must ask ourselves, who is it that moved? Did Allah abandon us? Or but rather did we abandon seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The first characteristic of people who are successful in this life and in the next are those who are proactive. They take every measure that they can, and then after that they leave the results up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Musa alayhi salam, as he's leading the people away from Fir'aun, in a very famous instance, the very famous miracle, wherein Musa alayhi salam comes across a body of water. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to strike at the sea, and it splits open. The scholars, they say, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands Musa to strike at the sea? Why didn't, when Musa just came to the sea, it just split open for him? If you were to go to a pool, a body of water, and you were to take a stick, and you were to hit that body of water with a stick, it took me a couple hours this morning to drive here. As I was driving, there's a very beautiful reservoir that we passed by. Imagine going to that body of water, and you're carrying with you a stick, and you go to the stick and you hit the stick. And the people ask you, what are you trying to do? You say, I'm trying to split this reservoir in half with my stick. People will look at you crazy. You're crazy. The scholars, they say, when Allah orders Musa to strike at the sea with his stick, because that was the most that Musa alayhi salam could do. If Musa had just walked up to the sea, he still had some ounce left in him, that he could have done something. But Allah wanted Musa to exert everything at the end, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of the results after that. It's a beautiful lesson for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. And that there is nothing for humanity except for what? They strive for. And if we want to be of people who, when you hear of Jannah and the luxuries of it and the highest ranks of Jannah, filled with the companions and the prophets and those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given nobility, given the status, given this honor, then it is incumbent upon us, if we want them, to strive for it. Because Jannatul Firdaus doesn't happen by accident. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those inhabitants. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who drink from the hands of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on that day. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us the neighbors of the Prophets in Jannah, to give us that status, and to give us that motivation to seek that status in this life. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. We always begin with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ask that He sends His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Our brothers and sisters, in the first khutbah we talked about one of the first characteristics that makes a person successful in this life and the next, because we want to emulate those who are successful both in this life and the next. And it is that purpose where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, and He teaches us this dua, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. O our Lord, give us the best of this life and the best of the next life, and protect us from the hellfire. It is this ihsan that we are taught to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. That we don't only have to have the afterlife, but rather we can also have this life. And if we're only seeking this life, but not the afterlife, then we will be of the losers. So that first characteristic is being proactive. The second characteristic is to not wait around assuming that there will be a perfect moment and a perfect time to start something. You know, as I deal with youth constantly, I remember and I always think of when I come across this point, there was a survey done amongst college students. There was a survey done among college students about what was the most difficult thing that they had to do, or the most difficult moment for them when it came to writing up final research papers. Final research papers. Especially in your senior year, you have to write final research papers that are very long. So what is the most difficult thing that a college student faces when it comes to writing a paper? And you know what the response was? Overwhelmingly, was that just starting, opening up their web browser, opening up their Microsoft Word, was the most difficult task that they had when it came to finishing their paper, or to writing their paper. And it's very interesting, the psychology behind it. They would sit down at their laptop, they would start, maybe they'd open up Facebook or Twitter, or they're on their phone and they check this website and they check that website, and then it's just a circular motion back and forth. Too many times, the best thing that we need to do is just to start. I have students, young ladies, they come and tell me, Ustad Zuhair, I want to start wearing hijab. I'll say, okay, what's the problem? I'm just waiting for the right moment. Okay, it's not. Brother Zuhair, I want to start praying. Okay, what's the problem? I want to be a good Muslim first. But you can be a good Muslim by start praying. And I've heard people tell me this before. I want to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, what's the problem? I'm not good enough yet. I can't pray. Why not? I'm not a good Muslim. Well, you can become a better one by starting to pray. Is that the end of it? No. Is it a good start? Yeah. Because there will never be a better moment than today. There is no perfect moment that's coming on the horizon. What you have is today. People will come and they say, we don't want our daughters to start wearing the hijab because we don't want them to start taking them off. We don't want them to take it on, take it off, take it on, take it off. No, there's steps to everything. You don't wake up and become a perfect Muslim. You don't. That's just not how anybody achieves success. You start with this baby steps. You start, okay. Start praying Dhuhr, start praying Asr. Then you work to Maghrib, and then you go to Isha, then you go with Fajr. No one expected everyone to just come in and abide by all of the rules from day one. In fact, this is why Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, if the first verses revealed were the prohibition of alcohol, nobody would have stopped drinking. But rather they started to build their iman with the salah. And then when the verses of prohibition of alcohol came, they said that the streets were flowing with wine and alcohol. Because everyone was willing to accept it at that moment. My dear brothers and sisters, success doesn't happen overnight. It's something day in and day out. There's no perfect moment, there is no perfect day. It's not better to start tomorrow, or the day after that, or the day after that. The best time to start is today. The best time to start is today. So if you want that forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't wait till the future comes. This is nothing but a trick of shaitan. If you want that success in this life and the next, start today. You want that pleasure of Allah? Start today. You want to seek Jannatul Firdaus? Start today. You want to, on the Day of Judgment, walk across the sirat with blazing speed. Start today. And have that sense of urgency, and that's the last point. That sense of urgency that really kindles your fire. Umar radiallahu anhu, he says, if I were to be told all of humanity was going to go to Jannah except for one person, and that one person was going to go to hellfire, I would be fearful and afraid that one person would be me. I would be fearful and afraid that one person would be me. This is a sense of urgency we need to approach our life. It's with that sense of urgency we can be successful in this life, and it's with that sense of urgency we can be successful in the next. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are successful. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. Or Lord, give us the best of this life. وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. And the best of the next life. وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Protect us from hellfire. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.